I'm not going to over-introduce this text, but I've been basically working on a novel for the last couple of years. And this is one of the early chapters that I wrote for this novel. And the novel itself is somewhat of an experiment because it's a sort of collage of different chapters which are associated together through various sort of themes, dealing with corporate reality and cyber reality, and what I would say is kind of digital banality to the way we live. But what I was really interested in is the body, in the sense that the body is vulnerable to this digital banality, which is now becoming the kind of techno-fascism that we were very much aware of. And so this novel, in a sense, is focused on the vulnerable. I'm going to read this chapter called Lazarus. I find there is life in my tongue, with which I can tell you darkness is trying to make way for something else. Slowly I draw in clarity as I blink. I blink a few more times as a bright orb forming above my head. Beneath its glow, there are two figures on each side of me, silhouetted against this light. They move steadily, with caution. Their two-dimensional lips animate. They nod at each other occasionally. They scribble on clipboards. I'd hazard a guess I'm on a hospital bed. I blink a little more. Friction inside my eyelids relents a little, slowly sharpening my vision, and the crusts of a long sleep fall away to the corners of my eyes. My throat feels small and dry. My breath falls weakly into a translucent muzzle. The two figures are still here. I watch them fiddle with the arrangement of some tubes. They peer into a dark digital screen, spitting out acrid green readouts of numbers. As I am leaned over and appear to be spoken to, further blinking brings their well-kept, closely cropped beards and crisp white coats into focus. I can't hear anything. Their faces float in front of me with prescribed empathy. Their brows furrow in confusion and possibly curiosity. I am an oddity to them. Why? I can't yet be sure. I cannot move anything. I feel heavy and formless, but yet able to look a little around the body that I have, at least that which is visible to me in this horizontal composition I am situated. And I can at least tell you I have limbs, which have many tubes protruding from them. My entire neck is numb, and it feels weighed down by some deep, persistent, what I can only refer to at this time as a punishment. There is a sense of having taken a path many have discussed. You could even begin to tell me right here that it is material of cliché. I have been told there was more to this. Someone somewhere has uttered those words. It does appear I may have had a life before this weight on my neck, and before this hospital bed, but I do not remember it. This is what they tell me. One of the men in white coats places a device of some kind over my eyes, and now, appearing before me is a layer of characters and shapes. I can still see what was previously there, but when I blink, the display changes, and I am onto somewhere else. I try not to blink, but then I have to. This blinking puts me into in an empty room. I can look around a little now and see four walls. I blink once more. Now I'm sitting more upright than I was, but able only to move my eyes. I look down, and the tubes still protrude from my arms. The two men are also still here, but now they are sitting with their arms rested casually on their crossed legs. They look patient. Speech remains a struggle for me, as my throat is still dehydrated. One of them speaks. We would like to ask you some questions, if that is okay. The other follows with, we are aware you must be in much pain, but if you're able to answer these questions, please raise your eyes just slightly to select the yes you see on the menu in front of you. "We won't take too long," says the first. Slightly above my line of sight appears a square translucent button, rendered rudimentarily with the letters YES. A cursor that appears just after they've finished speaking, as though triggered by the pause in their speech, trails the movements of my eyes and lands on something in my vision whenever my eyes themselves would. So I select yes. "Your neck is broken. Can you remember how this happened?" "No," I reply with a tiny voice. "What can you remember?" the beard to my left asks. "Waking up in the dark. It was cold," I whisper. "Nothing before waking up in the dark?" he probes. "No." "I understand this must all be very distressing for you, but we need to work through this process to decide how best to help you." I find his words vague. He looks at me with what I imagine could be compassion, but there is bewilderment behind his eyes, subtly betraying his professionalism. I glance at the soul logo that is formed of geometric shapes and is elegantly rendered on the right breast pocket of his white coat. "I don't know what there is to know. I am told there are things I do know, and supposedly there is more that I have seen. I know only as much as you here know now. I know words, though possibly not the same way you know words. In that when you say sky, what comes to mind for you? I imagine it'll be a cluster of fluffy cumulus against a bright flat wash of infinite blue. Or maybe dark membranes that hug the surface of your eyes and dance furtively away from your control as you lay on your back gazing up above to a beautiful clear day. Only through this kind of understanding of what you know to be a sky can I ask if you can imagine what little language I have at my disposal at this time to tell you what little I have to say. What is my sky? Since I guess this is now the beginning for me, I wonder how precious my language is. I am not sure of its worth, if it in itself has nothing to share. Within this language, I can only outline a few shapes to describe the fragility of my small moment. There is only this room, that bed, and before that, just darkness. It was a darkness that transitioned from a hot, deep red to an infinite but muffled blue-grey black as my eyes opened. Before I arrived at this darkness, I can only recall a single swell of light, and within that, the language I now have, and that you, I ask, must pardon for its limitations. Masses of shadowy forms that I could refer to as figures move around in this lowest of light. They were visible just below what I knew to be. They gestured towards me, I believe, in unison. But this mass was very fuzzy to me, and I could not distinguish what it may be, and for your clarity reading this as well. As this form faded from me, a reddish wash of darkness instead swam in front of my eyes, and I became aware of something. These figures then floated in a kind of never space which felt autonomous. From there I landed into something leaden and heavy, feeling more and more like a tangible form of despair. Now I have been told what pain is, I think I understand. When I dropped into this leaden consciousness you all seem to know so well, I did not. Beneath my eyes and my dry mouth, my neck flattened against the hard, cold surface upon which I lay. In this dark, my focus shifted from my small, dry throat and outwards to the thicker and tender matter that was swaddling it. If you must lay on your back long enough, does your worldview change? To have seen more, or to understand more, I suppose the questions here could be how one might know what darkness is if one has never seen the light. What is pain if it has never before been felt? Now, I can only tell you I lie here in a despair that is as true as it can be to me, and I find myself ready to end this suffering, but to go where? Somewhere this story began, and this beginning may have been the end I have been searching for. So in some sense, I am stuck. I know this outpouring of mine may not make any sense to you yet. He says he remembers nothing from before he woke up. Nothing at all? No, nothing. Incredible, what a mindfuck. For us, maybe. For him, well, I don't know. I cannot hear what they're saying. They look at me again and come closer. This will be difficult to answer, I'm sure, but do you have any idea how long you were conscious when we discovered you? So how precious is my language? Moreover, how did this tale begin? Now I do begin to understand this is an agony I cannot escape, so I may attempt to describe here and now what you understand as pain. For how long this story lasts, or has lasted, I cannot say. I knew nothing of before. Equally, unlike you, I know not of what could come next. I lay here in only thick darkness. When I first woke, I did not know what this is. Describing this darkness was not a possibility, as it is what I was. I still have no recollection of how I arrived here, but let me be true. When I woke, I had no recollection of anything at all. No recollection of what this suffocating blackness could be. None of what the God-forsaken pain that riddles my entire neck could be. Nothing. I grew to know of a kind of pulsing sensation, but what word or image could I associate with it if I am not blessed with a lexicon to utilize? What could I call it if it is my only known? Supposedly, I have no recollection of language either. Yet here my tongue fills with life enough and orders words sufficiently to relay this feeling to you. I begin to eke out some small recollections of an experience of some kind, a passing of time within where I am. Slowly forming are what you may call moments, but I as yet can't call anything. Not yet. It is still just a void. There appears to be, it seems, a way of looking into nothing. Nothing came before. Nothing yet exists for me beyond here, though the immediacy of what I feel from this volcanic contusion makes something very tangible. Sometimes there are things I see. They flash a little before me, then they disappear. They tease me. They gloat, but they're nothing yet traceable, nor anything I want to recognize. The action of opening and closing my eyes is just a muscular function. I understand this, and I'm now used to it. I can discern more detail within this thick, flat blackness. Slowly I can see before me a place where I still can't get my head around this. Some Lazarus shit. Picture the poor guy that found him. I heard he walked into the morgue with his morning coffee, and there was this banging sound coming from one of the tin cans. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ indeed. How long was he conscious for? Who knows? How could he even know? He doesn't remember anything. I shall try to guide you through the rest of what this all might mean. I fall into a picture, then another, and another, and I race to be able to tell you what lies within the frame of each subsequent image we are about to encounter together. And you will learn as I do. It is a new composition each time, an addition of some detail here and there, a wash of color, a tiny fragment of light, which will draw my eye, as collective a noun as there ever could be. There is more than this, of which I become aware, frame by frame, with increasing acuity. There is an urge growing within me to move the flatness of this matter I am trapped within. It is of a form, but one I am not yet able to envisage or move. What is there to see, in fact? I suppose I'm becoming aware of what you will know as sight, and in the real time, what you refer to as seeing, but only really through some texture. It isn't just black here. There is some detail. There are colors that comprise this black. So it falls somewhere in a chart. That one you have seen before, even if you haven't paid any attention to it. It is a chart of millions of colors, each represented by a tiny square. each of a slightly different color and tone. That chart for the act of seeing holds and forcibly binds us together. I move the only muscles I can move, namely my eyes then. The same you used to see, the same hex code chart. They sit in front of me and cannot operate independently of each other, as you know. I feel them float delicately in their designated little pools, and their movement is choreographed and dynamic as they grope their way around, trying to understand along with me. With them, I can differentiate a subtle change in the dark that happens either side of me. A line appears to have been rendered, and the blackness above me triggered by a horizontal demarcation of some sort, shifts ever so slightly in hue as I move these witnesses to my growing consciousness, to the left, or even to the right. It is interesting how quickly one's hell can become familiar. It grows through the supposedly immeasurable into something else, removing itself from the momentarily sheer power of shock and awe. Each image I have now accrued joins up into a section, a period I trace back to the first blink into this new consciousness. I can now find the beginning and know how I inhabit this state, if not where or who I am. I am stitching together these moments. I try with the images that flash in front of me, and the reliable sequence of stillness that I have known since the beginning of this story that I have regaled you with. From time to time, something thuds more emphatically beneath the pain. It is a panic I feel building when I become aware of something more than exists here. The panic is periodic, and I strain to envisage this, whatever it might be, as it always falls away into this wash of darkness that has become my familiarity. So at that moment, what is he? How do you mean? I mean, at that moment, the moment in which he has just woken with nothing, no recollection of anything, in that cold morgue, what is he? Increasingly, the more moments that gather, the more these moments burn into each other. Increasingly, my senses calibrate, and increasingly, I'm made aware of something more. Increasingly, my limited language gives way to some comprehension that there could be more than thick darkness, and increasingly, this quickens what does thud in my chest and grips at the weight that renders the passageway from my head to my torso immovable and inflamed. Are you the doctors looking after this case? If you mean codename Lazarus, then yes, we are. I didn't realize doctors gave code names to criminal cases. We generally don't. My colleague and I have been very intrigued by this particular case, officer. The patient's experience is, well, unusual. Unusual or not, we need an idea of when he will be ready for questioning. It'll be a while yet. We're just beginning to conduct our first examination since the patient arrived, and he is still in a very fragile, if no longer critical condition. Do you have any information for us, officer? From what we have gathered, this appears to have been a local drugs-related dispute. It seems to have somehow escalated into a racially motivated public lynching. It appears the patient was well known locally as the go-to dealer of Enliven. Granted, it isn't easy to come by in these parts, so he'd effectively become the only supplier. We're still investigating how this could have been escalated, but from the looks of it, demand outweighed supply. Withdrawn Enliveners aren't to be fucked with. The patient was discovered hanging from a tree and no longer breathing. Emergency services had then declared him deceased, so he was just logged and moved to the morgue. And what about the lynch mob? What about them? More figures are forming as a mass, or like a swarm of some kind. Within it, multiple shapes confront me as an amalgam of unfiltered rage. This marauding clump of shadows takes on more definition as it spits and rages and taunts. Smaller flecks of shadow break off and charge in my direction. The cluster looks up to me and curses my being. Faces slowly distinguish themselves from the mass. Their eyes are still concealed from me, while narrow bony noses protrude through into the light, my light. They still shout. I see a pendulum motion to these faces now. Closer and larger they are, then further and smaller, then closer again. There is an acrid burning smell of rope rubbing against tree bark. The pendulum creak, weakening my resolve. They still rage. They rage, and they kick. They spit. All of this is the mud of everything I have seen, and the only thing distinguishing itself from this mental darkness I have been living since I started this story. It is powerful, and an attempt of my own to see something else, or I might say to have known to have seen something else. Though in truth, I fail, and fall back into the narrowness of this world, the one I know, the hard, cold surface upon which I lay, and upon which I found knows nothing of liberality, and renders me only a bed of discomfort. Thank you.